This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-host, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And Janet's coming to you from Portland, Oregon. I'm coming to you from Tacoma or someplace in the universe.
Hello, everyone. How nice to be with you again. And Joan, wherever she is.
Yeah, wherever I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Well, today, maybe it's because I'm not located in time and space. Today we are talking more about generational patterns. So last week we talked about generational patterns in terms of family patterns that run through the lengths of generations. And today we're talking about societies that have these patterns running through them as well. They stretch back as old as mankind, and they're invisible to us because they originated sometimes thousands of years ago, and we just accept them as this is just how it is. So stay tuned today, because we are going to talk about ways as consciousness to easily and effortlessly transform these energies.
Yeah, there's lots of things going on out there. So good, all good stuff. So here's an invitation to go deeper with us, to connect with us beyond the show. And that's at our website, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. And there's where you're going to find all our connections. And we want to make sure that you use it and appreciate it, and that you take the stress off trying to remember addresses, phone numbers, etc. Just go to ConsciousConversationsWithJoanandJanet.com. You're going to find out all the latest podcasts that are there. Both of our blogs, Joan and I write, and I will say very well, about what we're noticing in group in life. She does that on Fridays, and I do it on Mondays. So there's always something new to enjoy. And then about our meetups, because we both host meetings, her up in the Puget Sound area and me here in Portland, Oregon. So you'll find out about our sessions, how we work with clients on one-on-one basis and in groups. So all kinds of good information. You'll get that at www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com.
And all our social media stuff is there as well. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, good stuff like that.
Yeah, all important stuff in this day and age of social. But it does take a lot of time. So go through all that. So we're going to talk about society and the generational patterns that we're all kind of swimming in lately. So lots of good information there, and pretty juicy, don't you think, Joan?
Yes, juicy indeed.
Juicy.
It depends on if you have juicy patterns, or maybe some people have dry patterns, or maybe at this time they're having dry heaves. I'm not certain.
Yeah, well, because what we're noticing is that for you, our listeners, and us with our clients, and even in ourselves, is how in all this uproar and mayhem and excitement that's coming down the pike here, and that we've been swimming in for a while, that a lot of the stuff that's coming up as a form of turmoil are things that seem generational in society. And we mean that by the way culture acts, the way society builds its morphic fields of information. And so you can be dealing with issues that really you weren't holding awareness of in a way that said, oh, this was my immediate experience, or it is your immediate experience, and you see it's a pattern that's coming from a long history. And so how to be aware of that as consciousness, as Joan always likes to say, and what we can do with that and play with.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I'm thinking, how do I say that? Same thing she was going to say, but say it in different words. The thing I notice that it doesn't matter what country or culture, there are similar issues that are bubbling to the surface. Right. And the things that are being tackled now are not dissimilar to things that have been tackled for before hundreds and thousands of years. Exactly. Yeah. And there's a bigger spotlight. We have better communication vehicles. You're following what's going on in, Saudi Arabia via Twitter, and you can see in real time people getting arrested because their women are having the effrontery to try to drive or go without their head. I just lost the name of it, but those sort of things, and the similar things are happening in the United States, even though we as women now can have our own bank accounts and we can vote. We're still trying to get equal pay, and we're still trying to get our health care equally covered. So there's definitely issues of equality that seem to be a societal pattern that has been going on for many millennia, actually.
I think it all comes down to how we treat each other in our emotional terrain and how we are survival-based creatures, and that ability to walk on this earth and be in community and be a living, vital part of life, and that in some ways we haven't shifted so much. We may have gotten very technically sophisticated, which is just a value, because who knows what comes in the future. For us, this may seem sophisticated technology compared to, what used to be 2,000 years ago. But on the spectrum of no time or place or space, those are they're not really appropriate values at times. They just indicate where we are. And for me, I don't think we deal with life emotionally well. We haven't gotten any better at that. And until we're willing to love this earth in our Western societies like they do in the indigenous regions and stuff, and how we treat each other, this is the time that's all come up. Be different.
Yes, that's great how you put that. It flashed on how we have historically not treated people well, and historically not treated each other well, and historically not valued life of any kind.
Yeah.
Someone did point out that at least now, if there's a disagreement in Congress, people aren't challenging each other to a duel.
Which has a great simplicity to it,
Oh, please, just meet me outside. We'll use sabers at 50 paces. But,
right.
And I guess we'll throw them at each other. So, people did, vicious, terrible, awful things to each other throughout history. And
they're still doing the same thing. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah, they are. And we're still striving to have equality and treating people with respect and, an evolution from alternate ways of dealing with disagreements rather than war. Mm-hmm. And I have this vague memory from, maybe it's past life memory. No, actually, it's a vague memory of some time in history where there was a good millennia within this culture. Maybe it's beyond Mesopotamian times, where it was ruled by women, and women were the rulers, they were the warriors. The roles were all reversed, and it was the longest period in human history where it was peaceful. The gods were goddesses, so the religious, the worship was female as well. And then, societies grow, societies crumble, and that started to crumble and, went back to the wicked ways of high testosterone. And now that's all looking at it from a particular vantage point, which is feet on the ground, male, female, aggression, things like that. And in this show, we elevate it to the perspective of consciousness, or as Janet would say, go deep into heart space to look at it. So actually, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to keep you in suspense about what we're going to talk about, because I just realized we need to go for a commercial break. So I want to remind folks that you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and we have to take a quick break here, but we're going to be talking about societal patterns when we come back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we're talking about generational patterns. So, Janet, when brought up all sorts of boots on the ground, male, female issues and lack of respect and everything, what's your perspective from heart space when you look at all this?
Well, I think we're funny. And I think what you see so much in society and what each of us are feeling is more of a man-made perception and assumption. And that I see how collectively morphic field energy, which is the unconscious biases and conscious biases of collectives that bring some moment into awareness, and it expands, and it starts to have a field projection experience when you look at it from a place of science or physics or something like that, I guess, that in the ability to communicate, there's great sloppiness. And there is, as mankind has gotten more so, we're not in just one little village. We're in a village that has spread out around the world over time. And so language is subject to much more than just the kernel that it started as. And I can see, and I notice greatly, where assumptions and presumptions get put together, and then all of a sudden it's a dominant energetic response out in the world. And we're not always very good with that. And we can be well-meaning in it, but a lot of times anything is going to have two sides to it. And we have to be a little more aware of what we say, what we feel, who we are, what's important to us than perhaps we have in the past. That's my feeling about it.
And my perspective as consciousness is that's what this planet is about.
Right.
This planet is one of dichotomy, polarities, contradictions, and it's created as a playground, an adventure for consciousness to experience the opposite of what it essentially is or what we essentially are. And we're experiencing all these polarities and opposites and ups and downs and negativities and things with our physical bodies. And when we can shift our perspective to experiencing it as consciousness, it becomes fun, it becomes interesting, it becomes curious, whimsical, it becomes funny. But when you're viewing it as your body, you've got absolutely no sense of humor about it. You're viewing it from completely survival level. Right. So it makes me realize that the other thing is that we are always striving. We are always striving to return to consciousness, to return to that, or to have that experience of expansion within our form. We create technology to replicate, our ability to fly, to communicate instantaneously over long distances, to connect to the cosmic internet via the, with the replication of it, with the regular internet, all these things. And we kind of miss the point that we already are. So where I was going with that is that it may never be resolved here on planet Earth. There's always going to be opposites and polarities and, not that, contradictions.
Yep, because that's what this life on this planet is about. Right. But I think what you can see is we are spiritual creatures. And we know that because we want to believe in things that we can't see. We want to know we're safe. And that's just back to humanity and connection, right? That's in any mammalian creature. There is a sense of connection. And if you don't get that, whether it's as love or food, that's nourishment. Babies die, when their needs aren't being met and stuff. And you can, if you start from that kind of placing, you can see why we develop the ways we are. Because in times of shortage, there isn't enough. And in times of war, there isn't enough. And there's all these things. But we have to appreciate that we're creating that on some level. Someone says, I want that. So this is what I'm willing to commit to getting that. Oh, that's yours. But no, I want it. I mean, it's kind of like you see a lot of the world going on as like 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds running things. And, that's where the development happens. And so if in certain societies, we've gotten this great split going on of where we've managed to tell ourselves, and that's the problems with belief as opposed to being. I mean, you want to believe in love, then be love. You want to believe in respect, then be respectful. I mean, you have to take it out of concepts and make it reality. That's what this life is all about, is our reality. I don't need an alternate reality. This is my alternate reality because it's different than someone who says the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Not in my reality. Right here where I am, I'm really enjoying myself. And we all have that capacity. And that's us as consciousness getting back in alignment with that ego self and consciousness and the interaction that takes place there.
I was listening to you and I was reflecting on my awareness, and you have this too, when you do your energy sessions, how you can take somebody who comes in with a story, who comes in with something rigid, stuck or not moving within their life, and how you can collapse that and it can leave completely differently.
Yeah. And there's also, Joan, where someone comes in with that stuck, hard, rigid place, and you realize that that's part of the spectrum of that state, and that may be what they explore. It's not that it differs and they never have this again. It's about it takes them into a different tangent of exploration. Because, I've just come to realize it's not for me to judge someone else's path and what they do with it. It's just to help enable them to get what is possible from the way they want it to be set up. And so, I'm not going to judge, no matter how much I want to on a personal level. It's consciousness. I appreciate that there are more than one way to experience life, and it doesn't have to follow my dictates. It follows our own dictates, or how we hold that to be.
Well, the other thing I think about, and we're talking about societal patterns, generational patterns, societal patterns, and how similar patterns have been rippling through time and space.
Yeah.
And so I was going to contradict everything I said in the beginning, which was like, I suspect that, they're not ever going to change kind of thing, to, oh, wait, we can collapse those patterns. We can create paradigm shifts. We can make things completely transform. And we might actually be in that process right now.
Oh, I think we definitely are. I think there's so much available to us. And that's the one nice thing, that's the double blade to social media, for instance, is you connect you around the world and you can participate. And that can be a force for good. That can be a force for something else. And there is support right now that in a bigger sense of just me and just you and my neighbor, that what issues that I've been dealing with have support in the community, and that we can look at this maybe a different way because it's reached that tipping point about, oh, this is a common experience and this doesn't feel good, and I'm going to say no this time. And that's what's so exciting and full of drama, and our passion is to embrace that from a constructive place, a helpful place, and realize that it is possible, and more than likely, and we know ourselves as consciousness, that can be different. It's not that the events change. The past is the past. It's how you relate to those events, and how you change in that relation changes how the future plays out. And I think that's what's important here.
I also think that at the core essence of all these conflicts, of the core essence of all these patterns, has to do with people feeling powerless and people wanting to gain more power. And where you see it as a distortion is, people wanting to have power over other people, people wanting to have more than other people, so they have to place them into less than positions.
Right.
And, or people feeling like they have less than, so they crouch down into less than positions. And the ironic thing is as consciousness, you are infinite. as consciousness, you are the creator of reality, all reality. And each one of us is consciousness with creating this reality, not just with the ability to, but creating this reality. And when you realize that, then everything falls into place and reality reorganizes, and all this stuff seems moot.
Well, what comes to mind when you're saying that is all these a few instances in my memory or awareness of history, and how this issue of power, and it's an interesting discussion, I guess, or what it's become. I think it's the difference between what it is and what it's become. The most powerful people are those that don't care about their outside circumstances. That even with those outside circumstances, which may be forming them, they take a stance and they are so powerful in it. And it's not necessarily in the forceful way, but in the powerful way of just being, and how we do that. And you can look at a Gandhi, and you can look at Martin Luther King. You can look at all kinds of people. We have wonderful examples through history who said, "You will not make me less than." And they may have lost their life for it, but that was their whole sense of expression. And we get it mixed up. Some people have got it that the more I have, which is about cessation, that is not about anything other than that. The more I have, the better I am, because they've learned that somewhere. And I would take that back, and I would go, if you got enough love when you were young, if you got nourished when you were young, and there was no threat to that, that might be different. I don't know for sure, but I know that that would play out differently. And those people that I see having experiences of killing one another and doing different things, none of them are coming out of what I would call loving, accepting home life. And I mean, people that have been shooting each other and those kind of things. The values are not like, because how could you shoot another person? And this is even in times of war.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so we're talking about people operating from lesser awareness as consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So they're operating from lesser awareness of consciousness, but they are still consciousness.
Of course, yeah.
So what would this conversation be like if we were coming from the perspective of consciousness, or you were coming from heart space, rather than examining if these people were only nurtured better, or people sat next to them in middle school.
Right. Well, I think where it's important is because what's now is because it wasn't then. And they are caught in the past. How many people do you know right now, Joan, that view themselves as consciousness and not fresh and in the moment? I would say most people aren't in the moment. They're in their past. So how do you do that? Oh, okay, there you go. You're just kind of in this pattern. I see that. And where can the pattern be different? We know as consciousness, we can observe it in that light and say, what if that could be different? We're not attached in our story of how we got there. So when you work with people, I know for myself, certainly, people go, this happened. And I go, okay. And if that could be different. And then all this information can show up. And you go, and then they become aware of, and that helps support and hold the new state that isn't right now. That was when they were 5 or 200 years ago or whatever. And that's what's exciting about it. So to just say that we're consciousness and things can change, look at all the work we've created to make that real for ourselves. And is everyone there? Not necessarily. I hope that's why they're listening, because our listeners are connecting to that part of themselves that says,
right. I mean,
this is real.
For me, that's the whole point, is that I'm communicating with people who are here, who are showing up, and they've tuned in because to hear what the main message is, which is that, to me, it's that they are consciousness.
Right. They are.
And there will always be other things going on in this planet and in this world that reflects unconsciousness. Right. And, we've got some wonderful reflections of unconsciousness, and there is no past either. So, so I don't even go into past life for that reason. So you can mute if the phone is ringing. And, there's lots of options for choices here. And so what I tell you, in my meetups, one of the things I do, my guideline I let them know, is that I'm going to always keep the conversation lifted to consciousness. And if we start to slide into conspiracy theory or something like that, I'm going to lift it back up. And I'll tell you, it's like, well, we've come out of some really exciting times, and I have been as guilty as anyone like me. Let's go into that, what's on Twitter today kind of thing. And one of the things I'm finding is being able to take a step back. Take a step back and view it from a different perspective. And when you view it from a different perspective, everything changes. You talk about reframing. I talk about viewing yourself as consciousness and viewing your world from consciousness. Everything changes. And it's really profound.
It is, isn't it? It's a delightful place to be. And when you're in this place, and hopefully our listeners are connecting on that level and being able to experience that with us, that what seems so present really is getting a little softer. There's a little more wiggle room. There's a little more quiet. There's a little more sacred. And those things that are pressing or are appearing or unfolding within us, or really reaching, I know, a moment of awareness is, really what it is, that a lot of this has been playing out culturally and in society, these patterns. And that doesn't mean anything anymore. And what it's like to hold it in that arena and just be able to notice ourselves and love ourselves enough to value whatever the story has been, and just know that that's just a moment in time, a placeholder in consciousness, and there's another one there. And it may be right next to the one that you thought was so real and tangible and vital. And as you hold this perspective in this state, you can just feel that shift taking place and what that's like. Yeah, there we go. We have such great listeners, Joan. I mean, they really hang with us out here, and you can feel that. And I want to thank all of you that are listening and joining us.
Yes. Yes, I do. I appreciate all of those listening through all the background sounds that are going on right now. And, I suddenly remembered reading something that we have these expectations from watching sci-fi movies that it's totally quiet in space. and that there are sounds in space, or there's a particular frequency or sound that people notice when they're up there. And also, I think that the space has a smell, like it's a sulfuric kind of smell.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But totally unrelated to any of that, I had this thing that just jumped into my head from, you mentioned the Aborigines in the very beginning.
Uh-huh.
And
indigenous people.
Indigenous people. I was thinking Aborigines particularly, but the indigenous people. And it's interesting that the Aborigines are the ones I'm thinking about specifically right now, is that their culture, I have to research this, but their culture is one of peacefulness and that essence, and that they are this very, very ancient culture that walks on the fringe of reality here, and yet they've got an advancement of spirit that we're all still longing to find. So that's a great example of the dichotomy on the planet today.
Well, I think what you're talking about is they hold for an interrelationship with nature and earth. And Western society seems to hold it as an outer relationship. And you're in a different mindset with that. And that's a societal thing, how we view where we are and our relationship to it. And if it's an inner relationship, then it's connection and what you do and what it does. And there's this symbiotic, wonderful relationship dynamic that's happening. When you think of it in terms of an outer relation, then you're on it. And it doesn't really connect in the same way. And that's one appreciation. There's more stewardship from indigenous culture. They're very aware of their surroundings and they react accordingly. They're not trying to control it. They're and I don't think that it's about whims. It's in the fluctuations and the variances that are there. And I think that's important dynamic field references to hold. I wasn't put here to conquer the earth. I think a lot of people hold that deep. And that is in everything that they participate in. That's not my orientation.
Yes, I agree with you. And the whole concept of wanting to conquer something is not from consciousness, because the consciousness has no need to conquer something that it's created. You know, and if you're an infinitely powerful being, you have no need to wield your power, because you just are.
Right.
You kind of see the people who are the most powerful, the ones that are most comfortable within their skin, and there's no need to be dominant, because that dominance is an old paradigm of power. You know, something I want to bring up is, in case people have tuned in late here, just those listeners, I want to let you know you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And if you want to know more about us, you can go to our website, www.consciousconversations.com, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. You can go to listen to our past podcasts. You can read our blogs. You can also find out about our meetups in Portland and in the Puget Sound area. You can go find out about our sessions, and you can also find out about us on social media. You can go find our YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook links there. We've got about 5 minutes before the break, so anything else you want to say, Janet?
Well, let's see. Seems to be a lot going on out there. I wonder how vibrant people feel about it. How, there's so much going on. There's so much political stuff going on, and how that's so vital to all of us. That vibrancy, that passion, that motivation, the inspiration that's coming. Great things happen out of those times. And I wonder, we've had the Age of Enlightenment, we've had the Dark Ages, we've had all kinds of ages through the history of men. And I wonder what this age is about, what this age will be viewed as.
Well, I think the difference between back then and now is, like, so for instance, the Dark Ages was just in Europe. Mm-hmm. There was incredible cultural renaissance going on in Asia at the same time. And so back then there were ebbs and flows going on all the time. And we're more of a global society now. And that doesn't mean, there's countries in Africa having a completely different experience than we are now, but there is more of a sense of all the individual countries sort of coming into sync here in terms of our evolution.
And I think this is very good. It's a great statement you're making about how we hold bias and we're not even aware of it when we express it, right? It's like, okay, it was the Dark Ages here, but it wasn't necessarily Dark Ages somewhere else, right? We have these statements that we make and we treat everything alike. And sometimes that's to our detriment because we do want to realize that societies develop at different times and places and spaces and states. And what's important, what we're looking at as the world has become more global, is those underlying things, principal events, experiences, emotions that run through all of us, irregardless of, that's such an interesting word, regardless of situation. And where we're feeling the collective as consciousness, that collective is really working, it's really vibrant. And I think that's what's present.
The way I see it is that greater consciousness is coming into form. And so the vibrance that you're talking about is the vibration of consciousness. And there's more of it present. So there you're detecting it on a more, when you say vibrancy, I'm seeing it, visually is bright, but the vibrancy is physically experiencing it as well. And it also can be translated as just that alertness, that sense of waking up.
Well, that's the thing about vibrancy and vibration, right? I think there's definitely that connection there. And when something shakes, when something vibrates, it's hard for anything to stick to it, and if there's the dust in everyday life, right? And it's going to resettle. It's going to go somewhere else. It's going to shake free. And I think, that's the vibrancy of humanity. That's the vibrancy of humanity as it recognizes itself as consciousness more. That it's shaking out all this stuff. And you raise the frequency higher, the vibration gets higher, it hits certain tunes, and we know as humans that we have a certain range, but we don't hear all that range that's out there. And there's just different ways we may be feeling and having sensations and emotions and thoughts that maybe are different or maybe at a different place than they used to be. And I think that's wonderful also.
We're going to some wonderful places here, and I want folks to hold those thoughts and stay with those feelings, but we need to stop to have another commercial break here. So I just want to remind folks that you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and I'm your host, Joan. Talking here with Janet, we will be talking more about generational patterns when we come right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs. Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan. Along here with Janet, we are talking about generational patterns and really societal patterns that span back beyond generations, I guess, millennial.
Yeah, a lot of generations. How about that? I think I can look to Earth and all its patterns. If you look at it over time and how life has changed, how the earth has changed, the different stages it's gone through, that's one thing I so appreciate about history, and whether it's physical history, geological history or societal history or however it is, and having a sense of where something has been. And if we're still on that, is that a pattern? Or are we watching the shifting, the evolving of a pattern? Does everything go back to what it was? Or as much as things change, do they stay the same? We have all these different ways that we engage in our universe and our worlds. And that's within us, how we hold all that information and in our connectedness with things around us.
I totally lost track of what you were saying. I went someplace completely different here.
Well, it went somewhere, didn't it? Well, it went off the planet. It went off the planet.
Right, exactly.
I was taken with it when you said about sound, because I think in order to have a sound, you have to have a hearing, right? So if there's nothing to hear, right, if there's no mechanism to register sound to those local, whatever that might be.
If a tree falls in the wood.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing,
If a man speaks in the wood, is he still wrong? Or when we perceive things, it's interesting is because people perceive things in different ways, and so some people tune in to how it feels physically, or how it looks visually, or how it audially. So and some people, this blows my mind, but some people even it's the smell of something they register first. Right. I grew up with teenage brothers. That just out of sheer survival, that has to be the last thing I noticed.
Well, I think everything is consciousness, right? And so it's just what the sensory mechanism is that's available in whatever is. I mean, a rock just registers sound differently, registers, vibration differently. But we're both doing it, and it's in opening people's minds up to the awareness that things are not what you think they are, that things can be different, that we run so much on assumptions and predictions and things that we predicate to have happened, the self-fulfilling prophecies. This is just a marvelous time to question all that, to say, is that really truly what I want to be in this moment? Because we know as consciousness, it can be different in this moment. And we're inviting our listeners, and what time and space they may be in, to join us in that playing field, that make no assumptions. And then what happens? If you take the judgment out, and something could be just 1 degree different, is that 1 degree enough? And it is if it's a ship. If you send that boat out and you shift off course, we would say, but maybe it's right on course, 1 degree, and it course corrects, it's going to land someplace different than if it wasn't. If you throw the ball and you change your hand just a little bit, it goes somewhere else. So it happens all the time. And we have our intention where we think we want to be and where we're going, and we find ourselves someplace different. And we look at that and we say, what might be at play? What if we change that state of information so we can be where we want to be? That's what we're doing. And we get to decide.
Oh, and what I'm noticing nowadays is that the directionals are changing as well. So how we are occupying being in time and space is totally different. And therefore, what we need to anchor to is an interesting term. What we anchor to gives us a different experience. So if we're anchoring to old concepts, if we're anchoring to old patterns, we're going to have a less comfortable experience here and now than if we just connect to the new.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't have a feeling that something is lost and disconnected and isn't the same. And they've formed their whole reality of who they are around that. And we're all at different places with that. And our ability to be fluid, or our ability to register this is my anchor. So we use it in our language, we use it in our sense of defining ourselves. And what we're just noticing is that on a generational societal playground, that a lot of those things that have been in place for a long time are shifting. And as far as I'm concerned, more power to it. Now, some of it may appear violent, some of it may appear, we won't even notice it. And it's everywhere in between. And it's our willingness to say, what is here to resist and why would I want to? And go from there.
Well, that's a lovely way to come towards the end here as we're sliding into home. This is a time to invite people to go deeper with us and to connect with them beyond the show. Would you like to say that, Janet?
Oh, yes. Everyone join us. Go to our radio website at www.Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. You're going to find out everything there as far as our blogs and our schedules of where we both interact in our communities. I also have my Fuzzy Photon Playground groups that are there. We can do those. Joan has all her great writings and all her mystic moments and everything. There's so many wonderful things you can find at the website. So please go there.
Yes, and our social media links. So if you want to connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, you can click there, and so go to www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com and find out more. I believe that the time is now, and to thank everyone for listening to the show, because it doesn't matter when you tune in, because there is no time or space as consciousness. You are helping to co-create the show in this moment. You are helping to create the morphic field of the show in this moment.
Yes, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and contact us. You can they can email us at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com if you have any ideas, suggestions, or things you'd just like us to be puzzled about. Please consider dropping us a line.
And again, thanks so much for tuning in, and tune in next week. Same time, same channels.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.